Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Nazir Daf Nun Hey, starting at the very top of the Amud. Yesterday we mentioned a possible machlokes in regards to why it is that we have a gzera derabanan of Eretz Ha'amim. Eretz Ha'amim is for people like us. We live in Chutz La'aretz, and there is a din derabanan that anyone who either touches the gush, the ground of Chutz La'aretz, has a din derabanan of tuma, or possibly even the avir, even just being exposed to the air, machlokes, seemingly a potential machlokes in the Gemara. We discussed this a little bit on yesterday's shiur, and today we're going to further that discussion for the first, most of the first amud. The Gemara says, "Lema kitanoi." Perhaps there's a machlokes tanaim about this. The Balei HaTosfos clarified this with simplicity. Lema kitanoi imishum avira imishum gusha. Very, very simple. Where they say that maybe there's a machlokes tanaim in regards to whether or not the Isser D'Rabbanan of Eretz Ha'amim is because of avira or if it's because of gush. What's the possible proof from a brisa? The Gemara quotes in Eruvin. We've seen this multiple times in Shas already. If a person manages to go into Eretz Ha'amim, but they do so in a sealed box, Rebbe mitame, a sealed box that's not touching the ground, by the way, which is not so simple, right? Talking about something that swings in the air, possibly an airplane would be our equivalent today.
Even if it's on a cart, that's considered.
That's ground. Ground is, we'll see that's going to come up in the Gemara, but you have to be like kind of floating, and it's not pashut. I don't know exactly what the Maseches is. So I know if somebody's holding it, that's possible, because I don't know if the Tumah does that. I don't know. But if it's on the ground mamish, then that's considered. So that's where we see a machlokas tanaim. Rebbe is mitame. Rebbe says that you're going to be tame. We'll see what the logic is here. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda mitar. Let's see what each shita holds. My love, isn't it that the machlokas says as follows? That Rebbe savar mishum avira. Rebbe holds that that's because of the air. The shita table migdal is up in the air. And Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda savar no, that it's not sufficient to just be in a shita table migdal in the airspace. Rather mishum gusha. So it's possible that we have a machlokas tanaim. Why the tomb of Eretz Ha'amim exists, and according to one approach, according to the approach of Rebbe, it's avir, and according to the approach of Yosef, Rebbe Yehuda, it's because of gush. And says the Gemara, lo, we reject that. 4 or 5 lines down. The kule alma mishum gusha. Perhaps even in that brisa, the whole machlokes is only when one is in contact directly with the ground, and really nobody holds of avir. What then is the machlokes in this brisa where Rebbe is metame and Rebbe Yosef, Rebbe Yehuda is metaher? Mar savar ohel zaruk shmei ohel. According to the shita according to one shita in the Gemara, Mar Savar, Ohel Zaruk Shmei Ohel, that it's considered an Ohel when it's being thrown. Mar Savar, Lo Shmei Ohel, that when it's Zaruk through the air, it's not Shmei Ohel. The Gemara on its own is a little difficult to understand, but the Rivan on the 5th line, where Rashi is supposed to be, explains with just very simple clarity. He says, here in this brisa, this is what's going on. The Rebbe, according to Rebbe, who holds the metame, who says that if there's a shida tevu migdal that floats in the air, that a person would be tame, kasavar oel zaruk lav shmei ohel. He's of the opinion that there's no din of ohel at all in that case, and therefore the tuma goes straight through the ohel. V'lo have hefsek ucheman demahalech mamish al gabe karkadami. He says there's no difference at all. You are basically standing on the ground. However, for Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda savar the shmei ohel, it is an ohel, and therefore there is a hefsek, and therefore you would not become tummy.
So only talking about Nazir, right?
Well, we're talking about in general about Eretz Ha'amim, just a broad conversation about Eretz Ha'amim. So no, it's not only about a Nazir, but it does apply to a Nazir. And then the previous Mishnah that we learned on Shabbos, the Mishnah on the bottom of Nun Dal Amud Aleph, wrapping up to the top of Nun Dal Amud Beis, we said that a Nazir who's exposed to Eretz Ha'amim would need some type of Tara process. He just wouldn't have to shave his head. So it does apply, but this is really a Shas sugya more than it's a Nazir sugya, and we're just applying it back to our case. So it's more of a broad topic. The Gemara says, wait 1 second. It cannot be. The Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that it is Shmei Ohel, that an Ohel Zaruk is Shmei Ohel. Why? Because 6 lines down on Nun Hey Amud Aleph, the Brisa writes, V'hatanya, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Teva Shimalea Kelim, V'zarka al Pnei HaMeis, remove the next word of Be'ohel, Temeya, that if it's thrown over a mace, then, and it's in a Teva, it's in a box, so in that case, it's Temeya. What does that show us? It shows us that it's Lav Shmei Ohel. It's not doesn't have the name of a title of oil because the tuma goes straight through, which means that the oil is not a hefsek. The brisa concludes, but had it been resting on the ground, that box would have been tahor. So the first part of this brisa is a stira for Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. The way we tried to understand Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, 6 lines from the bottom, was lo shmei ohel, that the ohel zarek is not real. Yet this brisa holds that it is shmei ohel. So therefore, the Gemara says you're right, and we have to re-understand the machlokas between Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. And here's the right way to understand it. Ela dekule alma mishum avira. Really, everyone, both Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, hold that the gzera derabanan of Eretz Ha'amim is because of the air in Eretz Ha'amim. Umar Savar, one person holds kevan de lo shchicha lo gazur be'rabanan. That would be Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. He says that since this mitzias of Ashida table migdal floating through the air is super uncommon, you have to come up with a roundabout cockamamie story that someone could float through the air. An airplane didn't exist in those days. Whatever the case may be, it's uncommon. And therefore, as we have as a general rule throughout halacha and throughout Shas, whenever a scenario is lo shchiach by a din derabanan, the chachamim were not gozer in such a case. That would be Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Umar Savar, the shita of Rebbe would be that afal gav de lo shchicha, even though it's true, taka, that it's very uncommon to have the case of Shida Tevu Migdal, still Gazur Bei Rabbanan. That's a chiddush in and of itself that requires Rishonim to understand. Why are we breaking the regular rules here around Tumas Eretz Ha'amim? Why would Rebbe say over here that even though it's Lo Shchiach, we still have Gzera Derabanan? That goes in the face of 100 Gemaras in Shas. We say all the time, Lo Shchiach to Gazur Bei Rabbanan, Lo Shchiach. We say it all the time. So that's its own shiur, requires its own research. And V'hatanya, we actually see this V'hatanya is b'nichusa. This one is a supportive V'hatanya, not a questioning one. And the Gemara says, what's the raya brura about shchichus, that we have this distinction of commonality with the Shida Tevo Migdal? Because the Brisa writes, V'hatanya hanichnas eretz ha'amim b'Shida Tevo Migdal tahor, because that's uncommon, and because it's uncommon, lo gazur bei rabbanon. But bekaron v'svinu v'iskaria. But if you're on a wagon, and if you're on a boat, and if you're on a larger boat, as the Rivan points out in Iskaria, that's klomar. He says a third of the way down, halfway down. Klomar b'svina gedola sheyesh by Iskaria, that has a mast. Okay, fine.
Is that
So,
even if you don't get off the boat?
Yes, for sure. Because if you get off the boat, then you're not even in the. You have to be in the Shida Teva Migdal.
No. I'm saying if you're on the boat and it comes into port and wherever,
And there's a
and you
mesa.
don't get off, you've been on the boat the whole time. Does it still?
He says you're tummy, because that's a case. That's being in chutz la'aretz. That's being in chutz la'aretz. You have to be over ground, not just over water. So
that's what I'm saying.
So like, let's say the edge of the boat comes over the beach, right? And like when you're in a rowboat, you kind of come up to the edge quick enough and the boat kind of hits like the sludge at the bottom and the boat stops. Right then you're tamei midrabanan. And according to this, that's because this case is shchiach. The boats are common. That's a normal way for people to travel. So therefore it's shchiach, and therefore you're tamei. So this brisa showed us the distinction that we saw with Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, that when things are uncommon, there's no gzera. That's what the brisa said, B'shida Teva Migdal. But when it is common for a person to hover over ground in a carriage or in a sfina in an iskaria, that because there is something common, so then tummy. And the Gemara presents one final answer to this, and that will bring us to the next part of the Mishnah, and that is V'ibai Sema Hacha Shema Yotzi Rosho Virubo L'Sham Pligi. We're concerned that you might stick your head out of the box into the air. Rosho Virubo. We have this same shiur as listed in Hilchos Sukkah and a couple of other places as well. So here the Gemara says we're concerned about Rosho Virubo. If you stay, l'chora, the way the Gemara understands this answer is that the way to understand Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, is that seemingly if you stay in the box and don't ever come out of the box, you're fine, no problem at all. But if you take Rosho Virubo out of the box into the avir, then we have our machlokas, Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, this is what the Brisa writes. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer hanichnas eretz ha'amim b'shida tevo migdal tahor ad sheyotzi l'sham rosho, and it should be virubo, not o rubo, because that doesn't make sense. Shouldn't be your head or rov. It's just a mistake in the text of the Gemara. So there we see a raya brura that this answer is probably the answer of the Gemara, that the machlokas about Eretz Ha'amim is about avira. That means that Eretz Ha'amim, you're tamei even in the avir. There's just a machlokas about Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda in this oddball case when you're in the box floating above the ground and you choose to put Rosh Virubo outside of the box. L'dugma, let's say you're in the case of, well, like a boat doesn't work. It has to be something flying through this. So an airplane. So let's say that you are on an airplane. While you're on the airplane, you're good to go. You get out of the airplane because you're jumping out of an airplane with it. The second you go into the air, you're done. You're tamei midrabanan. We should live in Eretz Yisrael. I'm just saying the Gemara holds that all of us are tamei midrabanan, and we would have to go through a process of tara. L'chora, we have to go through some kind of process of tara now to go live in Eretz Yisrael under proper not right now, but under proper circumstances with a Beis Hamikdash.
Amen.
Amen. Says the Gemara 5 lines from the bottom at the two dots of Maschil Umona. This was part of our Mishnah that we have on the very top of Nandal and Beis, that we had said that in a whole host of cases where it was a lower level of Tuma, where you're not going to get your haircut, we had said under those circumstances that granted you don't get your haircut, but you have to do Mazah Shlishi B'Shvi, and it doesn't ruin your days. And we're going to actually talk about the following line, which is, as it says on the top of Nandal and Beis, Umaschel Umona Miyad, and then right away you're able to count again. So our Gemara is bothered by this. Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, I'm going to qualify this for you. Lo shanu ela benazirus mu'etes. We only have this din that your days don't count when it's a nazirus mu'etes. Ava benazirus meruba mislak nami salkinle. But if you have a very long nazirus, then your days do count. What had we said in our Mishnah on the bottom of Nandal Amud Aleph and the top of Nandal Amud Beis? We had said that if a person is a Nazir and a Mitzorah, that the days are interrupted in some kind of way. Oh, so it doesn't ruin the previous days. And then umaschel mona miyad, the korban ein lo. So this is what we're trying to understand. And Rav Chisda gives us distinction. What?
Can you do a 2-for-1? Just wait.
With the haircut? No. Wait for what?
Okay, you're a Mitzvah
And a Nazir?
and a Nazir. Can you just wait that to the 30th day and do a 2-for-1?
No, because you're not done with your Mitzorah status until you do your haircut.
Right. The same with the Nazir.
But the Nazir status won't start counting again until you finish with your Nazirus process. So you're they're not overlapping, they're sequential. They're not. So this was Rav Chisda's distinction, is that we don't have any concerns about these days when it's Nazirus Mu'etes, but when it's a Nazirus Meruba, then the days of your Mitzorah status, they actually count. There's no stopping at all. Says the Gemara, that's not so simple. Maseches Rav Shravya. Rav Shravya has a problem with this. And while it's true that Rav Shravya seemingly is quoting our Brisa, our Mishnah from Nandal and Beis, he actually quotes it with a little bit of a different language. Look at his language here and compare it to the very top line of Nandal and Beis. Maschil umone miyad ve'ein mevatel bohenes hakodmen. That's a different organization of our language that we had. We first had ve'ein ososer es hakodmen, followed by umaschil umone miyad. There's no difference in regards to the content, seemingly, but the language is a little bit different. Like we have ve'ein ososer, and he says ve'ein mevatel. We'd have to find out what Rav Shravya, if he really had a different version of our Gemara. I don't know. We'd need to see Rishonim, need to see Gonim, and need to see exactly what's going on here. Either way, what Rav Shravya is doing is he's asking the following question. It seems from over here that in the case of the Nazirus Meruba, that it's mislak nami salkinle, that those days while you're a Mitzorah, we still count those days towards your status of your Nazirus, meaning there's no stopping of the count. It says the Gemara, B'mai, what is that case? Ilema bin Nazirus Mu'etes, if you want to say that we're talking about a Nazirus Mu'etes, namely a Nazirus that's a Stam Nazirus of only Shloshim, that's impossible. It has to be that there is a break in the days. It can't be that case is talking about that the Brisa, which says Ein mevatel bohenes hakodmen, it can't be that that's talking about a Nazirus Mu'etes. Why? Because it says the Gemara, Kaboy Gidol Seir, because you can't get a haircut until it's been 30 days. Of course, you have to interrupt the 30 days because you need 30 days to get your haircut. There's no possible way to do it. What did I miss?
No, nothing.
Oh.
Turn the page and went,
You should look at the bottom of the page before you make that sound. But yes, it's a very...
Well, not a bucky like you are.
I didn't learn these Tosfos. So then the Gemara says, Elalav, it must be that our Mishnah on Nandal is talking about Nazirus Meruba. The problem is that in regards to Nazirus Meruba, what are we talking about? V'katani maschilu mone miyad. There we said that there is a pause, but we do continue only after that pause. But Rav Nachman, Rav Chisda wanted to say that when it's an Nazirus Meruba, you don't stop counting at all. So we have a stira. Rav Chizda said the counting is non-stop when you have a Nazirus Meruba and you're also a Mitzorah. But our Mishnah says you do stop because it says that afterwards you're Maschil again. So how do we answer this question? Says the Gemara, and we're going to close with this answer of the Gemara. Hu mosiv la v'hu mefarek la. The author of the question is also the author of the answer, and that is Rav Shravya. And he says we must be talking about a case, b'nezirus bas chamishim yom. We're talking about a Nazirus where a person accepted upon themselves a specific set of days, 50 days. To Yosiv Esrin, he successfully accomplished the first 20. The Isyalda Beit Saras, he had Saras, and in a day, he got it all taken care of. And says the Gemara, Megalech Saraso, the Hadar Yosiv Tlas in Yom and Nazir, then he sits the last 30 days of Nazir. So we have a case scenario where there's 20 days that are successful. He finds out he's a Mitzorah, he quickly takes care of everything. I don't know how he figures it all out, the logistics. What about the Hesker? What about this Sveikos? That's why it's one of the Tosos at the bottom to deal with this Gemara. Actually, I think it's at the top of the next page. No. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says, and then Daha Islay Gidul Seir. So what that means is that the case of our Mishnah is talking about this case where it's talking about this 50-day Nazirus. That explains Rav Chizda, and therefore everything fits within the Mishnah as well, and those steers as well. We'll stop right here at Masiv, and Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with Daf Nun Vav. Wishing you all a beautiful night.